Welcome one, welcome all to the Blogging the Boys training camp preview extraordinaire. This is a roundtable of sorts. Our roundtable is actually returning here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel this coming week with the Dallas Cowboys arriving in Oxnard, California. But to get the week started, we have been going through our training camp preview series position by position, but now it's time to talk about the team as a whole. So we have brought in some of the best BTBers around, going in clockwise order. Joining myself, I'm RJ Ochoa, Tony Catalina. You can read all of these guys, by the way, at bloggingtheboys.com. You can hear Tony on Mondays on the Blogging the Boys podcast network on 1st and 10. Down in the bottom right position, the southeast quadrant of our little show here, we have Tom Ryle, who you can hear on Thursdays on our network on Riled Up with Roy White. And here, the southwest, which is the opposite of southeast, obviously, now stationed in the central part of the United States of America. If he wants to give you his exact latitude and longitude coordinates, it's up to him. It is David Howman. Howman, how's it going? Welcome to I guess football season. Do you view this as like the beginning of football season? Are you one of those people, or do you feel like it's just training camp? Like, where's your head at?
No, training camp's definitely the beginning of football season. It's when you really start getting excited about the fact that they're getting ready to put pads on. People are going to be out there. Dak's going to be slinging the ball everywhere. It's a fun time.
Tony, you might be the biggest homer associated with Blogging the Boys. You're up there. It might be a tie between you and Dave Sturchio, who you co-host 1st and 10 with, along with Aiden Davis. Sturch, really pumped. I think Howman remembers Sturch, a big Carolina Panthers fan, so he's probably all in on the Baker Mayfield, sort of era that is upon us. It's been Do you feel like Andy Dufresne a little bit, Tony? Like this offseason has been that tunnel. Do you feel like you've reached sweet freedom with the rain kind of now falling on your face, rinsing it all off?
Yeah, it hasn't been the most fun offseason, so I'm ready to kind of put that in the rear view. And once they get to Oxnard, we can kind of turn the page. 2022, I'm ready to go.
Tom, you are the most veteran among all of us at BTB and in life, if we're being honest. And so you have the most wisdom is I think the best way to say that. And you generally, I think, pontificate more than any of us on site. Again, everybody can read, everybody here at bloggingtheboys.com. Just kind of musings and thoughts and just, kind of things that are percolating and swirling around your mind. And many times this offseason, you've kind of asked questions about where this team is at or discussed hypothetical problems. So we'll start with a question that you actually kind of posed to the group as we were preparing for this. What is the identity of this team entering training camp 2022 Dallas Cowboys? How do you see them?
Well, I posed this question because I don't have a really good feel for it. I am kind of wondering what's going to develop. I think camp may determine this. What they should be, especially if you're talking on offense, with Dak Prescott, they should be a vertical team attacking down the field. But unfortunately, they have, a lot of questions at wide receiver, and they're not going to sure what's happened with the offensive line. And so I'm kind of wondering if this team doesn't emerge from camp leaning a lot more heavily on the running game, if for no other reason, because I think that's where Tyler Smith is going to develop fastest, I think, as a run blocker. Pass blocking is a little bit more difficult animal in the NFL. So I would not be surprised to see Ezekiel Elliott having a pretty big role compared to what we'd like him to have. And how well that works out may determine how difficult the first few weeks of the season are going to be for the Cowboys.
Howman, Tom said how we would kind of like Zeke to be utilized. That is a point of contention among many Cowboys fans. There are a sector that still are kind of feed Zeke, pound Zeke, whatever. And that is seemingly the way that the Dallas Cowboys want to play this thing. I mentioned the Carolina Panthers. Zeke injured his PCL against Carolina last year. They never gave him time off. They never deprioritized him in the offense. And so do you feel, Howman, two-part question, like the Cowboys are going to run that mentality back, no pun intended, here in 2022? And if so, do you feel like that will be to their detriment?
I do think that that's the approach that it looks like they're trying to go for. Tom mentioned Tyler Smith. That's definitely his style of play. Also, he's probably not going to play much, but Matt Waletzko that they drafted obviously for depth. His play style is very similar to Tyler Smith's aggressive, physical run blocking type. I think that's where they are trying to go, especially with Zeke going into a potential out year in his contract and Tony Pollard entering the final year of his contract. I think they want to essentially make the most of that duo while they still have them. I personally think that would be the wrong way to go. But also their moves that they've made, they've kind of downgraded their passing offense by getting rid of Amari Cooper, not trying to re-sign Cedric Wilson, not using some of their cap space that they have right now to go after a receiver in free agency like Odell Beckham, Will Fuller, anybody else that's out there on the market still. And so it really seems like they're putting all their eggs in the run game basket. And I think, we've seen that before in like the Scott Linehan days, and it didn't quite work out. I think it would be a mistake to go back to that.
Tony, I think that's really well said by Howman, and you made a point, Tony, and I've referenced this several times since on a recent episode of First and 10. You said you felt like this year's roster has, and these are my words now, has maybe kind of the most sort of, or the least amount of safety nets. I think if the season were to go perfectly for the Dallas Cowboys, if all 22 starters were to be completely and totally healthy week in and week out, then yeah, we can all sit here and we can argue that this is a really great team. But the reality of the NFL is it's a battle of attrition. The reality is that something, not likely, but something will go wrong, whether it's something predictable like Tyron Smith or something unpredictable, and they don't exactly seem prepared for that. Howman mentioned the Cowboys, at the time they were putting this together as training camp approaches, have the second most salary cap space in the NFL. That is a trophy seemingly that decorates Stephen Jones's mantle with extreme and great pride. So to that point, Tony, do the Cowboys have enough depth on the roster at the current moment in your mind? Because they're about to kind of shine it all out and see if it is enough for a 17-game regular season.
I think that's probably one of the most frustrating things about this offseason is the answer is no. I don't think there's enough depth. I think they're very top heavy. I think they have some guys in this, across the board that in a lot of different positions that are top tier. I think, they have good running backs, good quarterback, and you can go down the list of, defense seems to be where a lot of their playmakers are as well. But they didn't do much behind that. And I think that's where a lot of frustration comes. I know Cowboys fans across the board are used to not spending big money in free agency. But when you see that they have over $20 million worth of cap space and the second most in the entire league and not use that to fill holes or at least get a little deeper in depth purposes, it's frustrating because you mentioned it. You have to play almost clean, perfect football the whole year for it to not, rear its ugly head. And it's just not realistic. This isn't a contact sport. This is a collision sport. So things are going to happen. There are things like you mentioned with Tyron Smith that are predictable, and you're hoping that the path changes and that doesn't become what we know it to be as a trend. But at the end of the day, they don't have depth. Like, this is the first year that I felt in a while that they just didn't have the back end where they could weather a storm. There isn't a Cedric Wilson there, when somebody's injured. It's a tough situation to look at this team and feel comfortable with what they have if plan B had to be what transpired.
Howman, do you agree that the roster is top heavy? And I know that it sounds like we're getting a little bit negative here, but this is the story. This is the identity of this team. So is it maybe that simplistic, David, that they are top heavy and that might topple them over throughout the campaign?
I think they're top heavy in terms of talent that is a known commodity at this point. A lot of their depth, their backups are players that we really haven't seen. Like at receiver, Noah Brown is, he hasn't really done a whole lot as an actual receiver. Sumi Fihoko was essentially redshirting last year. Jalen Tolbert's a rookie. So I think those names and some of the other names around the roster, when you look at it, are players that I wouldn't be terribly surprised if they did end up being productive when they're called upon, if they're called upon. In the secondary, Kelvin Joseph and Deshaun Wright last year didn't play much on defense, but they both look really good in training camp in the preseason. If they have to step up, they could very well surprise us. But in terms of looking at the roster and what we know is going to be good, we know Dak Prescott is money when he's on. Ezekiel Elliott, even though he hasn't been at that level that he was earlier in his career, he's still a very good running back. DeMarcus Lawrence is a great pass rusher and severely underrated in my opinion. But we just don't know about these depth pieces, and odds are we're going to find out at some point this season.
Along those lines, Tom, because Howman's right. There is very likely a way where the Cowboys are going to be proven right in their assessment, and maybe it's a place where we agree with them, maybe it's a place where we don't agree with them, and I think we would all love, more than anything actually, for the Cowboys to be able to just drag us, right? Like you were, none of you believed enough in Dante Fowler, you were all ridiculous. Look at Amari in Cleveland, whatever, and I mean, and fine, roast us. I hope they have that opportunity to. So in that spirit, Tom, as training camp gets set to begin here in just a couple of days, this is the toughest question so far, and I've awarded it to you. What is the most likely way that the Cowboys can prove us wrong this season? What is the most likely place, spot on the roster, decision, however you want to take this? And Howman and Tony will have to answer as well. And there's no stealing of answers around here; those are always the rules. But where will they most likely prove us wrong, Tom?
Most likely prove us wrong. I guess it would have to be at wide receiver. That they come out with the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 position look really good right off the bat, which would kind of floor me if it did. But it's also a place where they've got so many unknowns that maybe something could pop up. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that's the most likely. I'm just, not too sure they're going to prove us wrong about a whole lot this year.
That's also the easiest one. So, I mean, the lowest hanging fruit is often the sweetest, Tom. But, like Jalen Tolbert could hit, and all of a sudden, these problems seemingly go away. Tony, we'll save you for last. So, Howman, what is the most likely way the Cowboys could prove us wrong this season in your mind?
I think the most likely way that they prove us wrong is with their offensive line, notably Tyler Smith and Terrence Steele. I personally did not like the Tyler Smith pick being in the first round, but I actually really like the player. I think he's got tons of potential. I think he's going to be a really good fit at left guard between Tyron Smith and Tyler Biadasz. I think that he could end up having a really great rookie year playing at guard. I think Terrence Steele, especially if they're going to go to more of a ground and pound kind of attack, or even leaning on the run more heavy, that definitely plays to Terrence Steele's strengths. He's a much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And that we could see this offensive line really get back to what the Dallas offensive line has been traditionally and what they were towards the beginning of last year. And I think that would be really a moment where the Cowboys are like, we were right, and our offensive line is great again. Aren't you happy?
I think, the Tyler Smith thing would be, again, we're all rooting for all these, but like, that would really go a long way. I think it would really restore a lot of our faith in their ability to draft in general, especially with the fact that he was a smaller school prospect, that they telegraphed it so much. It would really go a long way, I think, in kind of making that time of year a little bit more positive. So again, fingers crossed in that sense. So Tony, finally to you, what is the most likely way in which the Cowboys prove us wrong? Tom said wide receiver hitting. Howman is just kind of taking the offensive line as a whole. I do agree. It's not just Tyler Smith. It's Terrence Steele. He's such an underrated storyline. I don't think enough people are really paying as much attention to the fact that Dallas bailed on Lyle Collins. But Tony, where do you see it?
For me, I'm going to have to go to the other side of the trenches. I think what they've done at the defensive line has left a little bit of a head scratch. I mean, Randy Gregory's situation was kind of botched from the beginning. How that whole situation went down left more to be desired, quite frankly. The fact that they took Sam Williams in the second round, where a lot of people felt like there were other options there, or they could have got him later. That's Dan Quinn standing on his convictions there. Bringing in Dante Fowler, who his statistical output hasn't been top notch in the last couple of years, but they believe being with Dan Quinn will help him. So to answer the question, if Dan Quinn hits right on Sam Williams, Dante Fowler, the way they use Micah Parsons and get creative there, having DeMarcus Lawrence sign honestly a team-friendly deal to keep him around and kind of make things work on the defensive line, that's where they can really, shut people like me up. Because it's, I'm sitting here thinking like, man, you let Randy Gregory go. You didn't really put in a huge effort for Von Miller. I guess if you say comparable money to Randy Gregory, that's an effort. But if they go out there and Sam Williams balls and Micah Parsons has another big year, I'll be quiet.
None of you had the right answer, just to be very clear. Howman came the closest, I thought, or had the most satisfying one. Tony, you were second. Tom, again, it was the lowest hanging fruit, to be fair. But, it is a legitimate answer. To me, I think, I think we all subscribe to the idea that regression to the mean is a thing. We saw it last year from an injury standpoint, right? We talked about that so much a year ago, how the Cowboys were just destroyed by injuries in 2020, that would regress to the mean. We saw that with the 49ers as well. They regressed to the mean, and obviously they had a lot of success last year as well. And so the answer would be, it does exist in the world of finite possibilities or infinite possibilities, I guess, that they could be the exception, that Trayvon Diggs could have double-digit interceptions again, that Micah Parsons could just be the one of the greatest talents in NFL history to ever play on the defensive side of the ball, and they could capitalize off of that and ride that wave. Tony, I know you kind of touched on that a little bit, but you casted too wide of a net. I couldn't have you win that question. You just went all over the place. So Howman, since you won that one, we'll go back to you here. You can take this how you want. Who do you hope winds up as training camp MVP? And you can take that from the perspective of, like, who do you just want to see play very well? Or who do you want to see from the perspective of that would really help the team if this player is truly at a training camp MVP sort of place? So it's up to you. This is your question. This is the preview as a whole. So who do you want to see? Who does David Howman want to see be the Dallas Cowboys training camp MVP?
The first name that popped into my head was Jabril Cox. And, he's coming off a really bad injury last year, and he didn't play much last year as a rookie. But he was a player when they drafted him. I was really excited because I feel like he fell a few rounds too far from where he should have been. I think he's a great pair for Micah Parsons at linebacker. Micah, as we saw, Micah ended up being so much more than any of us thought. But he's definitely better when he's rushing the passer, whereas Jabril Cox is a little bit better when he's playing in coverage. I think the two of those skill sets can really pair off of each other and make a really great linebacker core. And it looks like the Cowboys are kind of counting on Jabril Cox to come in and take up a starting role or at least a key contributor role. So I want to see where he's at, just physically coming back from that injury, where he's at in terms of knowing the playbook and knowing where he needs to be. And if he's able to become that guy that people thought that he was going to be when he was first drafted, that could be a huge upgrade for the defense while we're talking about some of the other pieces that have left. That's
a great answer. Great, solid start. 5,000 points to David Howman here for getting us started. I'm going to go second because I want to. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. Tom, I'll let you decide if it's a fair cheat or not, and you can go third. I want it to be either Josh Ball or Matt Waletzko. I think maybe my biggest question is who is this team's swing tackle? And I can literally answer that question, but I can't answer it in full or total consciousness and feel good about that. And so I'm fine with it being either one of them. And by that, I mean, I just need to see somebody separate themselves, somebody emerge, somebody establish themselves as a legitimate, true, total swing tackle. It was such a luxury last year having Terrence Steele, knowing that he existed as an option if and when Tyron or Lyle were to go down or whatever the case may be. Obviously, Lyle wound up suspended. But so is that a fair answer, Tom, to kind of cast it on two players but one position, if that makes sense?
No, I think swing tackle is one of the things that we're not talking about enough. As you said, they had a great option last year and wound up having to use him extensively. And he turned out to be so good, he became the starting right tackle, which now means they're back to square one at that. So on the fact that the nature of the position is, I think, something that needs to be talked about, we'll allow it.
All right. Tony, who had a better answer so far, Howman or me?
Ooh, I like Howman. Howman's my guy.
That's why you're going last. Tom, who do you hope winds up as training camp MVP? So far, Jabril Cox and either swing tackle option or off the table.
Dorrance Armstrong. I think.
Okay, so Jerry Jones has joined the show, seemingly. Okay.
Yeah, I think if he came out and proved he was their starting right defensive end, particularly strong against the run, so that they could put him out there on the early downs and then rotate in some more firepower at pass rushing, I think that would really solidify what I think is going to be a real strength of the defense anyway. I feel good about this team coming in on the defensive line. I know they still have some questions about, defensive tackle. They don't really have a legitimate run stuffing one tech identified yet, and I'd like to see him do that. But I think if they had that guy they knew they could plug in as the starter, give Sam Williams a year or two to develop, I think that would really help the team. And I think pass rush is going to be crucial to the performance of the Cowboys anyway. So, if he could cover both ends of that and be good in both aspects of the game, that would be a real win for the team.
Tony, before we get your answer, Howman, I want to ask you a question. I think that Tom's point here is a double-edged sword. I think it's a matter of winning the battle but losing the war. Do you think, Howman, if Tom were to be right and if Dorrance Armstrong were to be the training camp MVP, I think that would only serve for the negative in the long term for the Cowboys, because it would feed the way they went about free agency this year. It would justify the letting go of Randy Gregory, the letting walk, the whatever disagreement, and relying. I mean, we're not joking. Stephen Jones on 105 through the Fan literally cited their sack numbers as this method of comparing the two, and was like, yeah, they're basically the same player. And so, Howman, am I being unfair to them in saying that if Tom were to be right, that would feed that level of thinking in the future, and maybe you're willing to expense that in the name of the 2022 season specifically, but I'm just curious for your thoughts.
I think you have a point there to some degree, but
that's right. I do. All right.
I'm a huge Dorrance Armstrong fan, so I do have some trouble saying that in this particular instance it would be a bad thing. I think Dorrance, every single year it seems I've been saying this is going to be his year to break out. And then, something else happens. Robert Quinn goes off, or Randy Gregory goes off last year. So I think that this is another opportunity where Dorrance Armstrong could finally prove me right after all these years. But again, I think realistically the Cowboys' approach to free agency, I don't think that it's going to change whether or not their free agents pay off or not. I think that, because Stephen Jones is not in danger of losing his job anytime soon. So why would he ever change his approach when he doesn't have to worry about whether he'll still be employed if it doesn't work out?
That's a good point. So big, super apathetic point, but it's definitely a fair point when you consider who the Cowboys are and how they've operated. All right, Tony, we've had some tremendous answers so far. So we'll put it to you. We have 2 on the defensive side of the ball, and we've got 1 on the offensive side of the ball. Again, you can take this anywhere you want. It can be chalk, it can be whatever. Who do you hope winds up as training camp MVP for the Cowboys?
Yeah, I know you're going to give me some stuff for this, and it's not groundbreaking, but I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that if Dak Prescott is the training camp MVP,
Tony.
It's the best for this team. I want to see all the tweets where he went perfect in the 7-on-7s. I want to see him be lights out in the 11-on-9, drills. I need that. I think I'm in the camp of, and I've been pretty vocal saying that I think year 7, this might be Dak Prescott's biggest, most important season he's had. I think this is where the rubber meets the road in him and his career and his legacy. And I think the Cowboys as a whole are going to be much better if their franchise quarterback had a clean offseason. It came in with a new, worked up body. He looks lean and mean, and that's what everybody's saying. It's best shape of your life season, but I actually do believe it the way Dak Prescott looks. And if he comes out there and he's locked in and he does his thing in training camp and everybody is, singing his praises all through July into August, I think that's best for this team.
Tom, I mean, if this isn't a question, but if we were to ask the question, like, what would be the biggest mirages throughout camp? Wouldn't the quarterback having success and not again, Tony, really not to hate on your answer, but like having success in 7-on-7s or whatever the case may be, like that's a little bit, it's hard to trust, and we've trusted things like that before, Tom. So like that, I think that Tony's answer is one that, and I think we all obviously trust Dak Prescott, but that is the type of answer that leads to you potentially getting burned further down the road.
Yeah, Dak is a good enough quarterback. He's going to look good in camp.
Wow. So Tony, wow, you said your answer was dumb and stupid. Yeah. Wow.
I mean, we were burned last year when we thought it was supposed to be CD's all-pro season, right? CD Lamb was the star of the show last year.
And that's what I'm saying, Tony. Like offensive things like that can be a little bit miragey. You can kind of be lulled into a false sense of security. But to your point, Tom, you mentioned when I gave my answer that we weren't talking about swing tackle enough. I mean, Tony, do you feel I don't think we're talking enough because Dak is so popular, and I think we've turned the corner where he's now more loved than he is hated. Like, obviously, there's still a sector of people that will never get it, but Dak had a really poor second half of the season last year, and it feels like we have conveniently forgot that part of things. And I'm not saying that makes him not this quarterback, not that quarterback, but that did happen. We can't ignore that.
No, the heat is on. I fully believe that. I feel the way the 49ers game went, the way the second half of the season, he looked night and day. I truly do believe that this may be a fork in the road in his career. I do think that, he's always going to be a quality NFL quarterback. But how far does he take it? Where does his legacy go? I think it starts here, and I think he understands that. I think this is important for the Dallas Cowboys. The return on their investment was not to go 12-5 and lose to the 49ers in the wild card round. They didn't bring this guy or sign this guy to a long-term deal to have that be the peak of the success for this team.
Howman, it's been said that the Cowboys were a little bit too soft and, got kind of run over by the Niners and things like that. And, that was thrown out as a reason why they drafted Tyler Smith, a reason why they drafted John Ridgeway, kind of these glass eater type players. I mean, respect, cool. Like, I'm fine with, bring some attitude, but like that disposition, like the non-soft, the anti-soft disposition has to start with Dak and Micah. I mean, so like, if I want to see anything, to Tony's point, I do want to see this, like, you know what, like the way we went about it wasn't good enough. I don't know. Are we reading a little bit too into it at that much at this point, Howman?
I don't think so. I think that's definitely where we're at. But I think I think that it's been understated to a degree just how much of a disparity there was when Mike McCarthy first took over to the kind of environment that had been created under the Jason Garrett coaching staff. And I don't want to say necessarily that it was soft, because the players very rarely would actually quit on Jason Garrett. That was one thing that everyone always said about his tenure. But a lot of times, in those 3 straight elimination games his first 3 years as head coach, when it was do or die, they didn't come through. When it was do or die in the playoffs, the years that he went there, they didn't come through. And I think especially in Mike McCarthy's first year, when so many players were getting hurt, we saw that really come out in a very ugly way with how many losses were piling up. I think Dak Prescott is, by all accounts, he's got one of the best work ethics on the team. He's a leader in the locker room. I think Micah Parsons has been showing he's that same kind of player and person in the locker room. So I think it definitely, you're right, it starts with them, but I think that there's been so much that had to be overcome to where, like Tony was saying, this is going to be the year. This is where they get to really leave their mark now that they've brought in the glass eaters like John Ridgeway, Tyler Smith. Last year they got Quentin Bohanna. They had Neville Gallimore in McCarthy's first year. So I think at this point they've had 3 years of getting those types of players, and especially it was talked about more this year. I think this is where we have to see it start paying off.
That's well said. Okay, last question for everybody here, and it involves bringing up more questions, but that's just kind of the nature of this. We're going to go clockwise. So, Tony, you get us started. This question worth 1,000,000 points. Tony, what is your biggest question about the Dallas Cowboys entering training camp?
Is there enough? We mentioned it earlier. Is there enough talent to weather a storm? Is there enough? We talk about how, Howman talked about it, right? Yes, we all love the idea that Jalen Tolbert can come in and, I think his ceiling is high. I think we expect certain things from Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs that we understand may come down to the recession. They might come back to the mean there a little bit, but is there enough talent around? Did they do enough in free agency? Did the draft picks, are they going to pan out? So I'm just really interested to see what happens when not everything is perfect, when they're not going, controlling the time of possession and, converting every 3rd down and 3. And when does things get ugly? What does this team look like? Are they going to be able to have the depth or the talent around them to really push the envelope? Because I think we all agree the NFC East got better this year. I don't think this division is a cakewalk. I don't think the NFC is a cakewalk. I mean, I think by and large, I think this team got a little worse this offseason. So I'm just curious to see what it's going to look like when they get out there.
Okay. That's a good question. Good job. Good luck following that, Tom. What is your biggest question about the Cowboys entering camp?
Well, it actually is kind of like through the looking glass version of Tony's answer, but
Oh,
directed at the coaching staff. Does the coaching staff have the ability to adapt and use what they do have and get through things? Because I don't think they showed that last year when Dak was a little bit hobbled. They didn't seem to have a good response. And I'm looking specifically at Kellen Moore because, I've got a little bit more faith in Dan Quinn because he did seem to get a lot out of players. You look at somebody like Jaron Curse, who never really did anything, and then all of a sudden that guy's just out there, killing things with 102 tackles last year. So what happens when the offensive line doesn't pan out the way they hope? What happens if the wide receivers are a little bit CD and the committee? And what happens if Ezekiel Elliott isn't able to go out there and bust through holes like his all-season workout videos are trying to tell us he's going to do?
Jeez, Tom.
What do they do to adjust? Because adjusting to the reality of what they have has not been this team's strength in a long time. They for so long have been, we're going to play the game the way we're going to play it. That was really a thing under Jason Garrett and going back as far as Scott Linehan. And, they need to get out of that. And I haven't seen that they've really gotten out of that in the Mike McCarthy era yet.
Wow. So interesting approach. Kind of the same question on that side of the screen. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys consulted or whatever. Howman, do you have a question about the Cowboys entering camp that doesn't involve whether or not they can basically Tony and Tom are wondering whether they can win an episode of Chopped. That's what they're wondering, whether this coaching staff can do it. Do you have a similar question, or are you going to think outside the box?
I'll be a little bit outside of the box, although I do think that Mike McCarthy would crush it at Chopped, for the record.
Yeah, for sure.
To me, the biggest question is whether or not the team actually believes that Mike McCarthy is still in control of this team. Because the very beginning of the offseason, everyone was talking about Sean Payton. Everyone, all the sports books are saying Mike McCarthy has some of the best odds to be the first coach fired. And what it reminds me of is the 49ers going into the last year with Jim Harbaugh. And at that point, all Jim Harbaugh had done was win. And they had been to the Super Bowl and, they came up short there, but they were regularly in the playoffs, winning playoff games, had a great team, great defense. And then all through that last offseason, there were rumblings about, the ownership is thinking they might want to get rid of Harbaugh. They ended up having a really average season. Harbaugh ended up getting basically fired, even though he didn't technically get fired. Mm-hmm. A bunch of the players either retired or they left in free agency, and the team was set back, decades. So I'm just worried about if Mike McCarthy is going to be entering a similar situation to what Harbaugh was in that situation. It doesn't really matter if they have the talent or if the players play up to their level, because if the head coach is constantly looking over his shoulder, constantly in fear, and if the players believe that he's constantly in fear, it makes it that much harder to actually, focus on the game, focus on what you're trying to do each day. And that just kind of sets you up to fail before you even have a chance.
Wow. Well, so Jim Tomsula has already been on this Cowboys staff, but maybe, succeeding Mike McCarthy next year the way he did Jim Harbaugh in San Francisco. I love that answer, Howman. I don't think we've all done it, but I don't think we've underscored enough. I don't think you can how much pressure he's under and how awkward it is that it is so public from ownership. I mean, it's an extremely unique situation. I will go next, and then I will ask each of you to pick your favorite question. You can't pick your own, obviously. So, this is going to be y'all's favorite, just letting you know. I am very interested to see how they handle over the season, not being drooled over, not being adorned, not being anointed, not being, the talk of the town. I mean, we have really reached a point where they are just a brand. That's really kind of how they feel. And I have found it so interesting over this offseason. If you look at the last 5 division winning seasons for this team, 2007, 2009, 2014, 2016, and 2018, the off seasons following all felt like, and they all generally obviously had a horrifying, devastating, dramatic loss that ended the division winning season, but they all had the vibe that, okay, they've loaded up, they're coming back now, this roster is even better, now they're coming for it all. And this has been the opposite. I can't think of a sequence that we have experienced like this, in, I don't know, maybe 40 years when it comes to the Cowboys, where they are coming off of a very successful campaign, but people are so apathetic and checked out. And to your point, Tony, I think it's almost universally agreed that the roster is weakened, that all 4 teams in the division contributed to the gap closing between the Cowboys and the field. And so I'm very interested to see how they handle that, because they are not the team that everybody is confident. They're not going to be, in week 1 when the Rams and Bills are getting ready to play, and NBC does all their Super Bowl picks for the year. They're not going to be this popular hot ticket the way they have been for the last couple of years. I think the shine from the 2020 draft class that so many people loved has worn off, and I think that people have just kind of finally given up and accepted that they are just this walking sort of meme. And so that's a tough pill to swallow, but at this point they have to prove that expectation wrong, and they haven't been able to. They only fulfill the prophecy that they are a joke and that they will collapse when things matter the most and the stakes are the highest. So that's my biggest question. So Tom, we'll go first with you. Who had the best question throughout all 4 of us?
Well, the one that I found most intriguing was Howman's.
Starting strong for Howman. Look at that.
I,
Tony, you basically had the same question as Tom, and he didn't pick you. So just letting you know.
Hey, I think that I've been kind of tuning it out, because I think it all is going to come down to what happens if they get to the playoffs and what happens there. Mike McCarthy's fate is going based on that. Now, would it be possible this team could lose its heart, especially given they've got some very tough games early on in the season? If that happened, could we see Mike McCarthy go in the middle of the season if things really started to crater? And could we say that was wrong?
Howman, since you were picked, who had your favorite question?
I'm going to go ahead with Tom's question.
Oh my gosh, Tony! Look at this back and forth pandering.
I think he was hitting on a really good point about how last year when they started going through their slump, Dak wasn't quite playing up to his strengths, and there were a few other things that weren't going right. And the coaching staff, as great as they were early in the year, they really didn't adjust the way that I had hoped. And, I think really highly of Kellen Moore. I think really highly of Dan Quinn and everybody on this coaching staff. But if you look at that tail end, and especially as we got to the 49ers game, you kind of look and say, well, they should have done better. They should have been prepared for the things that were thrown their way. So I think it's a really good question to ask. How are they going to improve and kind of redeem themselves from the way last season ended?
Tony, who had your favorite question?
It's not easy for me to say this, RJ. It's not easy because you've been giving me a lot of BS lately.
Let's go.
I like your answer, and the reason why is you kind of touched on all the points that I felt all this offseason. You've mentioned a few times, more than a few times, that I'm a pretty optimistic, homerish type of fan. But this year I've had a real different kind of disdain for this team this offseason. I kind of felt like I've kind of felt like the pulse of this fan base has kind of felt like that a little bit. It's been a lot of show me, don't tell me anymore. Like the things that used to get this fan base riled up, we don't care anymore. Like we just want to see it on the field. It's not the tricks and this isn't a circus. This isn't Barnum and Bailey. I don't care for that. Now it's kind of the situation where I'm sitting here going, yeah, now I'm looking at it with a different lens, and what Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones are saying, it's not lining up with how I used to view this team. So it's tough. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I just want to see it.
Do any of you recall how the Cowboys website, the mothership that we know and love and respect so much, how they announced the schedule? Do any of you recall off the top of your head?
Stephen A. Smith.
Yes, that was.
Yeah, it took me a minute to think about it as right before I asked the question. And to your point, Tony, I think in years past, if the Kool-Aid tasted well, or if we didn't care, if we were just shoving it down our gullet, we'd be like, this is so funny, this is so cool. We would have made some like memes. We would have had a whole, kind of great time with it. But now it's just like we're existing. We're just burning time. We're just ripping pages off the calendar. It's almost they're like they're annoying in some ways. Like everything they do is annoying. So in the spirit of that, and to keep things even and all square, my favorite question was posed by Tony, because I do think that you represent a lot of fans, in that I think a lot of people are in this place of like, show me, don't tell me, enough. Like enough with the talking, enough with the hot boys and the watermelon smashing and the monkey butt. I'm sick of like the flavor of the month, whatever the cool story is. I need you to have legitimate, concrete results, because you haven't yet. And all this other stuff is cool, and yeah, it passes the time. We read the stories while we're out taking pumpkin photos, but it doesn't have the net result that we all want and that we all need. And you guys are walking and talking like people who have those credentials when you don't. I mean, Tony, today, the day we're putting this video together, at least it'll go out over the weekend on the channel, the Cowboys announced throwback uniforms. That's all they are. They're a team that can only throw back on their history. We have Tony Casillas on our podcast network, and he said on a it was a few months ago at this point, episode, I don't know if you guys recall, I think it was DeMarcus Lawrence shared a photo of Michael Irvin and Deion Sanders with the Lombardi trophy after Super Bowl 30. And while Tony wasn't on that team, he said, I'm sick of these guys sharing our photos. You know what I mean? Like, go get your own photos, go get your own memories, go do your own things. And so, Tony, I think you are emblematic of a lot of people in that way.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like you've done all episode really. For me, it's really that, like, we're tired of hearing the show. It's just show me, don't tell me. We're just tired of it. Like the Stephen A stuff left, it's weird. Like after a bad season, the way the season, it just felt weird. And it's like everything they're saying is just weird. The Jerryisms and everything they got to say. It's like, we don't want to hear this. We're tired of it. We've been feed this. I mean, 26 years. I think we're tired, man. Like let's just get some wins. And I don't care if they say a word. If they win a Super Bowl, fine by me.
Tony's on Twitter at Tony_Catalina. Tom is on Twitter at Tom Ryle BTV. Howman is on Twitter at _DH44_. He borders the DH44 with the underscore right there. He has the 44, I presume, for Yordan Alvarez, big Houston Astros fan. David Howman is. But anyway, so yeah, this was our training camp preview here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. Subscribe. We're going to have a lot of content throughout the season starting now. That's why we're here. So Tom, this conversation is over. Make a random noise, the most random noise that you can conjure in your mind, and then we'll leave. And it better be good, and it better not be something that we have heard before, and it better be allowable for children, because sometimes parents listen to this in the car. So make a random noise, make it great, and then we'll sign off. You're muted, Tom, so that was really great. So for a noise specifically. I didn't like that. Tony, give us a noise. Howman, show these dudes how it's done, please.
It's a throw up.